To the program right now, Lauren Wright, scholar at Princeton University, as well as Democratic strategist Chris Hahn. Let me go to the tariffs, which was the news, I think, out of the briefing today. You never know with President Trump to the last minute if something, especially like this, Lauren's going to go into effect. They say that they will, and then Kelly brought up this idea about whether he'd be open to reversing himself and that exchange. Let me play that from the briefing, and then we'll come back and talk about all of this. Here it is.
If tariffs do increase prices for Americans, will the administration reverse them?
That's a hypothetical question, and the president is intent on ensuring that he effectively implements tariffs while cutting inflation and costs for the American people.
Are we seeing the start of a trade war with Canada?
I don't think so. I think the president is going to implement those tariffs tomorrow, and he will respond to Mr. Trudeau's comments in due time, I am sure.
Talking about the outgoing Canadian Prime Minister. Lauren, this sounds very familiar. We went through this in Trump administration #1. Stock market sells off a bit. It's down on the Dow by about 350 points right now. Back and forth. Sometimes the tariffs go in place. Sometimes they don't. How do you see all of it?
Well, free market conservatives are very, very hesitant and critical of tariffs, understandably so. But what Trump's been doing lately, and this happened with Colombia and the coffee fiasco, is he makes these tariff threats. And actually, his threats are sometimes more effective than the policies themselves. And he's been very willing to reverse course on some of his signature policies, whether it's economy or immigration, in the past. And he's someone who says he's not sensitive to public opinion, but he really quite often is. And so, yes, these might go into effect, and we're certainly running out of time, and they could even have an adverse effect, but it's entirely possible, in my opinion, that he either reverses course or he pulls back when he gets what he wants.
The most sensitive he can be to public opinion, just judging by history, Chris, is the public opinion expressed by investors in buying and selling stocks. Now, I don't want to overdo it because it's not like the market is tanking today. It's less than 1%. On the Dow, right? But it is down. And sometimes that affects, right? We know in the past how the president sees things. Do you think it will now?
Yeah, look, I agree with Lauren. He sometimes rattles the saber and then pulls back and claims victory, even if he doesn't get everything he wants. But I do think that he doesn't understand that we get a good percentage of our oil from Canada. I think conservatives lost their minds when there was a delay in the Keystone Pipeline, which was bringing oil sands from Canada that go to our refineries. Even though we get a lot of our oil domestically, there's a certain mix that goes into the refinery of oil that allows for it to go. Now, oil prices and gas prices are going to rise because of these tariffs. There's just no doubt it's going to happen. Cost of everyday goods are going to rise because of these tariffs. You won't be able to get your avocado toast on Monday at the same price, Connell. I know you like it. So I would stock up over the weekend on avocados, but they're hard to keep.
Listen, there's, trust me, I know. There's some of the numbers behind it. I'm going to switch subjects right now because this is how it goes in the Trump administration. We go from one subject to another and more news comes in. Latest news. Associated Press is now reporting that the president is moving to fire FBI agents who were involved in the investigation surrounding him. Again, the New Associated Press report, Lauren, he's going to get rid of a number of FBI agents who were involved in these cases. So this comes on the heels of the Kash Patel hearing yesterday, and people using words like purge and all that kind of thing. And the people close to the administration say, no, that's not what we're doing. What about if it's this? What would you say?
I would say that's exactly what he said he was going to do on the campaign trail. And you might think it's bad politics and it's bad for the country and bad for our law enforcement agents. I wouldn't even necessarily disagree with all of those things, but I'm losing a little bit of patience with the complaining from Democrats about these things they failed to articulate on the campaign trail, and they utterly, miserably failed at an opportunity to say why these things Trump said he was going to do are so bad for the country. Now we have a situation where he's in there, he's implementing exactly the policies he said he was going to, and that includes wiping out a lot of people in some of these agencies, and he was elected on exactly that platform.
No, I get the point you're making. We talked about it with some other subjects last week, that elections have consequences, and if you didn't want this to happen, don't lose. How do you respond, Chris Hahn?
Yeah, look, Democrats did try to articulate this on the campaign trail, and Donald Trump said the price of eggs were too high. Well, I think that over the weekend, the price of eggs are going to go up even higher than they've gone up over the last 9 days, as well as the price of cars and gas and everything else that we get in this country that is now getting a tariff from Donald Trump. So, yes, Lauren's right.
But what about
he
the
did
move
say
on
he
the,
was gonna
on
do
the
this on
FBI
campaign
agents
trail,
if this is what he's doing?
He did say he would do this on the campaign trail, and there were a lot of Republicans who said, no, 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 he will not. And a lot of those Republicans are now in the United States Senate.
But Chris,
and they
Chris,
stood
the
for office saying
Democrats
that they would
said
stand up to him when he violates norms. And I expect those senators, particularly the one from Pennsylvania, to stand up to the president now and say, you know what, maybe we better hold off on Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard, because the president is doing things that we told our voters that we would stand up to him if he did.
That actually is an interesting point. Go ahead, Lauren.
Specific.
But what about that point that Chris is making, that this might, from a practical perspective, have some sort of an impact on confirmations that are still pending? Do you think there's anything to that?
No, I think every single one of these people is going to get through, even the most controversial
Even
of them,
Gabbard?
because Republicans, yes, they don't want to go to war with the incoming administration over an agenda that the American people chose. And Democrats were not specific about how Trump would clean house and what the consequences would be. They said the country itself will cease to exist. Democracy will be no more. They had these sweeping, really broad claims, none of which are clearly coming true. And they're stuck holding the bag, and they look really disingenuous.
Well, this
now.
idea about what do you have an enemies list was the question. It was a question to Patel, a question to Trump. As well, no, we don't exactly have an enemies list. This does look like an enemies list. I hear Lauren's point, which is like, okay, we can do it because we're in power. But there is something about, do you just say one thing and now are you doing another? Chris, make another point here.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on a lot of campaigns. Specifics don't win elections, just for the record. Broad themes do, and Trump's broad theme won, right? Now we're getting into the specifics. And a lot of people were brought in on those, a lot of people talked about those specifics on the campaign trail who are now in public office, and they should fight back. But look, here's where we are. I don't agree with Lauren. I do think that Tulsi is in big trouble. I think the other two have a little bit of trouble. But we'll see what happens over the weekend. And I also think that what happened with this big freeze we had on Monday, I think a lot of members of Congress got a lot of calls from their constituents and groups that they have supported over the last couple of years saying, what's going on here? And that panic and chaos is just a little bit of a chink in the armor for Donald Trump. And I'm not saying it's going to kill him right now, but it starts to make the members of the House and Senate who have to stand for re-election, many of them less than 2 years from now, start to wondering what they've gotten themselves into. And they might have to start standing up sooner than we thought, because of the chaos that this man is bringing to the White House.
Using words like chaos, which you heard last time around, brings up a larger point. Let me make this the final one and give it to you, Lauren. And we're going to talk more about this later. You have 2 weeks of the administration now. Have you seen a difference, and we'll add what we just heard on the FBI breaking news to the list here, but between week 1 and week 2, just on the tablet, I'll bring it up to make the points here, what Trump has done in his 2 weeks. Week 1, sending troops to the border, ending the birthright citizenship, ended up being blocked, but again, coming up with 35 executive orders. All told, I think if you're doing a fair analysis of week 1, efficient. In many ways, even with, a few bumps to the road, maybe disciplined compared to the first administration, at least. Week 2, the funding freeze, the memo, what was going on there.
Yes.
Lake and Riley, okay. The executive orders today, okay. But the handling of the plane crash, focusing on DEI, not as disciplined. To use Chris's term, was it chaotic? Do you see a difference between the weeks so far, Lauren?
Yes, and Trump will reach for the stars, and he won't get there some of the time, and that's the way the system's supposed to work. He's getting checked by his courts, many of which are his own appointees, by the way, and that's how it's going to go. Just one more point on the appointments, though. Both the most controversial people, RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, are sort of beloved inconsistent Democrats who left the party. And that's why they're so popular, some of these anti-establishment stances. And so, I think there's nothing Republicans love more than a Democrat that leaves the party. Those are some of those controversial Trump picks that were with him on the campaign trail.
All right, got to run.
His bigger problem is Senator Cassidy. RFK's problem is Senator Cassidy, who might block him in committee.
That would be the one to watch.
Tulsi Gabbard might get blocked by the new senator from Utah. Right in the committee. They might
had
not even get a
problems
vote.
with both parties yesterday, but we'll see what happens and whether they all get through. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Laura. Much more to come here on NewsNation Now.